We're getting more reaction to the activists who've been arrested in Zimbabwe. Police in that country have arrested Tendai Biti, Samuel Gwenzi, Vusumzi Moyo and Robinson Chere. They've been charged with disorderly conduct in a public place after their arrest and detention at the Robert Mugabe International Airport. Now the three activists were removed from a domestic flight in Harare. Tendai Biti is a human rights defender. The Kofi Annan Foundation awarded her the Kofi Annan Next Generation Democracy Prize last year. Now, this comes ahead of the SADC summit in Zimbabwe, and we speak to former Zimbabwean Finance Minister Tendai Biti, who joins us live now. Thank you so much for your time, sir, this evening. Your reaction to this latest development?
Well, it's an incredible and quite absurd, quite brazen assault on human rights. You speak of the arrest of Tendai Biti, Vusmoyo and two others, including Robinson Chere. But as I'm talking to you now, I've counted about 21 activists that have been arrested, including Jacob Ngaribvumwe, including Bishop Kevin Nyamakanga. So this has just happened in the last 48 hours. And remember, we have 79 people, Jameson Timber and 78 others, who were arrested on International Youth Day, June 16, trying to commemorate that day. Remember, we've had Job Scala languishing in prison for 2 years, only for the High Court to say that there were no charges. So what, in fact, you are seeing is an unacceptable crackdown on human rights. What you are seeing is authoritarian hegemony, authoritarian consolidation, and this is happening a few days before the SADC summit, which is why I said it's ridiculous, it's unbelievable, it's fascist, and it's unacceptable. And
I'm going to get to the SADC summit in just a moment, but when you read the charge sheet, they talk about them being accused of disorderly conduct and are said to have been seen on video footage chanting and, chanting abusive words in the midst of a crowd at Harare Magistrates Court. And the charge sheet further alleges that there are witnesses who will testify to this particular effect. What do you think is the real reason then for the arrest, if this is not it?
Well, clearly what you are stating there is frivolous and vexatious. Our Constitution guarantees in Section 59 the right of peaceful assembly. And whenever you assemble peacefully, you are entitled to sing, you are entitled to shout, you are entitled to do slogans. If this was a crime in South Africa, most South Africans would be inside a prison. So this is clearly frivolous and vexatious. The bottom line is that you've got a paranoid regime, schizophrenic regime that intends to close political space and is therefore unleashed a violence and repression against its people. And we've been living like this for the past 44 years of independence because of ZANU-PF.
And when you look at of course, what what has just happened and what you've just said as well, how far does this then, begin to take opposition politics in that country? Because some say it's a regression, especially when you look at, Job Sinkala, for example, that particular matter, also a number of times being postponed in custody. At some point he was getting sick, and then you look at the crackdowns that we also saw even during the elections. So when you then look at this, what does it mean then for opposition members?
Look, it's really a sad day. It's Armageddon. And I think that once again, we find ourselves on the edge. Once again, we find ourselves on a precipice. Once again, we find ourselves at an implosion, a point in respect of which, as human rights defenders, as Democrats, democratic avenues of expression are being closed, living inevitable, unconstitutional means. This, by the way, is what gave rise to the coup of November 2017, because Zimbabweans could not express themselves democratically through elections, through public demonstrations. I can see there the images you are seeing. viciously tortured and assaulted activists. What for? For power. It's not worth it. It's not justified. It's a blatant abuse of our constitution, blatant abuse of Africanism and Ubuntu. More so, as I said, a few days before the SADC summit.
Are you fearing more arrests?
I think so. I think it's a very paranoid, very unpredictable regime that is extremely vacuous and will resort to its default status quo, which is violence, repression, and coercion.
What does it mean then for the upcoming SADC summit?
I think the leaders, they will try to shield the leaders from having the full view of what's happening in Zimbabwe, but the leaders won't be fooled. The question really is, will the leaders stand up to the madness and insanity that is taking place in Zimbabwe? Will Cyril Ramaphosa stand up? Will Tshisekedi stand up? Will President Nyusi, stand up? President Chakwera stand up? That's the million-dollar question.
Will they, in your view?
I don't think so. I can't see Angola, Namibia, Frelimo and Swapo in the ANC standing up to the human rights abuse in Zimbabwe. Liberation movements tend to group together. It's an old boys club of autocrats and dying political parties. The South African election of 29 May shows the future of liberation movements. They are withering and dying a natural death. So they can only resort to violence and power is what ZANU-PF is doing in Zimbabwe.
Before I let you go, then you talk about liberation movements and what is taking place there. Are you saying that it's because they're struggling to find their place and in a modern democracy, or is there something more when it comes to these liberation movements who we are seeing? It's either they're disintegrating or losing support across the continent.
The liberation movements were never wired to transform. They were excellent delivering the dream of one man, one vote, literally. But beyond that, they had no agenda of transformation. And once the reality catches up with them, the population wakes up, the honeymoon is over, they resort to repression, they resort to violence driven by a culture of impunity and a culture of entitlement and a messianic complex. If we can't have it, no one can have it. In the Solomonic parable of the two women fighting over the baby, the liberation movements are the woman who says, let's cut this baby in half. And that's what you are seeing in Zimbabwe, in Mozambique, and to some extent in South Africa.
Thank you so much for your time this evening, and hopefully maybe at some point we get to speak to the government about their right of reply and what exactly is going on here. But thank you so much. Do appreciate it. That was former Zimbabwean Finance Minister Tendai Biti.